This year marks Pokemon's 30th anniversary. Man, does that make me feel old. And with the announcement of Fire Red and Leaf Green coming to Switch on February 27th, I think it's the perfect time for us to revisit these gems. Fire Red and Leaf Green are known to be some of the most beloved titles in the entire franchise, but have they held up as well as we remember? And are they worth the $20 digital-only price tag that Nintendo has so generously served up for us? We're gonna find out. Let's do this. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green originally released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance, promising enhanced remakes of the original Red, Blue, and Green if you were in Japan, Generation 1 games with updated visuals and audio, technical fixes and significant rebalancing, modern Pokemon gameplay enhancements, as well as a bunch of additional post-game content. As we all know, remakes don't always turn out the way fans would hope. Sometimes they try to appeal to a new audience that isn't interested, while alienating the existing fans, ultimately making a product for no one. That was certainly not the case here, though. In fact, these enhanced remakes achieved what very few do. They honor the original games and story beautifully, while upgrading them in almost every conceivable way to provide the best experience for both newcomers and veterans alike. A rare feat indeed, and these served as a strong foundation for the future, excellent Generation 2 remakes, Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Now, just for some background on my perspective, I'm an OG Pokemon fan. I was playing this exact Pokemon Blue cartridge on this chunky Game Boy in 1998, before Pokemon Yellow had even come out. You can still see where my dog tried to eat it. I've played a lot of these games over the last 3 decades, not competitively, but simply as an enjoyer of the classic Pokemon formula. As such, since my opinion is that of the casual, nostalgic enjoyer, I think a lot of you will find my take on this fairly relatable. Now understand, I have a lot of love for the original Gen 1 games, but they have not aged terribly well. They're a little crusty. They're literally broken in a number of different ways, and they can be a bit off-putting for a newcomer and a bit rough even as a revisit from an old fan. Fire Red and Leaf Green still honor the spirit of the originals, but they offer a polished run through the Kanto region that will serve most players better outside of specific nostalgic intent. In my opinion, since 2004, these games specifically have stood as the definitive, best games in the series for both newcomers to Pokemon in general, as well as those wanting to try out challenge runs like Nuzlocke for the first time. There's a lot to love here, so let's get into it, starting with the game's presentation. Quick disclaimer before we get too far into this, all of this footage and this review are based on the Game Boy Advance version. The Switch version just isn't out yet, but since it's being ported over one for one with no changes, everything here should stand. That said, after the official release, if there are any updates needed to this review, I will provide those in a pinned comment. The first thing you're going to notice when you boot these games up is the beautifully polished and frankly timeless pixel art aesthetic. It's my opinion that the Game Boy Advance era of the Pokemon games, specifically the Fire Red and Leaf Green entries, are the best that Pokemon has ever looked. These games, along with, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, I guess, predate the almost bulbous, chibi-esque character models of your Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearls, as well as the, frankly, low-budget anime look of the modern franchise. If you're someone who can appreciate solid pixel art, you're really going to like the aesthetic of the overworld and the character models. Not only that, but all of the various Pokemon have upgraded front and back sprites for the battle scenes, as well as their own unique animations for a bunch of their different abilities. This definitely fleshes out the combat experience and makes you feel more engaged with the combat in general. They didn't slouch on the audio either. It's the same soundtrack you know and love from the Red and Blue games, but spruced up with additional polish for maximum nostalgic enjoyment. But it wasn't just the presentation that got an overhaul, but the gameplay as well. The core gameplay itself does stay true to the basic Pokemon formula that we all know and love. You choose your starter Pokemon and venture out into the wide open world as an unsupervised 10-year-old. Catch and raise wild Pokemon to add them to your team, leveling them up through battles with other wild Pokemon and Pokemon trainers, evolving them into more powerful forms, then using this powerful new team of hand-picked Pokemon to challenge the region's 8 gym leaders to collect their badges. Once you've proven your mettle by collecting all 8 badges, you can finally complete the ultimate challenge, battling the game's Elite Four in an attempt to become the Pokemon League champion. And of course, there's always that side quest of becoming the very best like no one ever was, collecting every single Pokemon in the Pokedex to become a true Pokemon master. And that's a tried and true recipe that you're probably familiar with and expecting here, but the enhancements come in the form not just of the visual improvements and battle animations that we discussed earlier, but also, and arguably more importantly, updating the game's base systems to Generation 3 mechanics. This means including Pokemon passives like natures and abilities to greatly increase the gameplay depth, the introduction of held items for utility and healing in battle, as well as updating the typing of certain moves, like the introduction of Dark-type moves to help counter the overpowered Psychic types of the original Generation 1. Though it's worth noting for more experienced players that this is before the physical special split, so certain moves do underperform on certain Pokemon. On top of all that, we've got a much cleaner user interface, the introduction of running shoes early in the game for a lot of quality of life, improved movesets to broaden the range of usable Pokemon, tons of bug fixes, and the complete absence of all the weird Gen 1 glitches that were so famous from the original games. And on top of all that, we get an expanded storyline with post-game content where you're able to actually capture Generation 2 Pokemon. Sum all of these things together and you end up with a well-rounded, extremely polished game that really is a joy to experience even still to this day. And I always like to add a note on a game's performance, but there's really not much to talk about here. I guess we'll see if there's some technical glitches on the Switch port, but I highly doubt it. If there are though, again, I will note those in the pinned comment below. But alright, we've established that this game is good, but the real question that we need to answer here is, should you spend $20 to buy a digital-only copy for your Switch? And if so, which of the two should you buy? Well, we're going to answer those in reverse order, because the latter of the two is really quite simple. Fire Red and Leaf Green have region-exclusive Pokemon. If you don't plan on trading with anybody, you're just going to have a solo experience, look up the region exclusives for Fire Red and Leaf Green and decide which ones you like better, and just buy that copy of the game. However, if you do have local friends who you will see in person and can utilize that wireless local trading feature, you guys should get opposite versions of each other. One of you gets Fire Red, one of you gets Leaf Green, and you guys trade the region exclusives to each other to complete your Pokedex. Now on to the question of whether you should even buy it at all. I do think $20 feels maybe a touch high for a straight port of a Game Boy Advance game, but unfortunately the games are so good and it's such a good entry point into the series that I do kinda think it's still worth it. And the ability to play this on your TV or blown up on the big ol' Switch or Switch 2 handheld screen really is kinda nice. Because unfortunately the alternatives are pretty sparse. Unless you own the physical cartridge and hardware that can play it, or you don't mind using a device to emulate it, which of course you would always do legally. Hi Nintendo, please don't sue me. We get all of our ROMs by legally dumping our own cartridges, I promise. But yeah, if you were going to emulate it, you probably would have done so already, and you're not watching this video in the first place. So yes, I recommend it. I wish it wasn't $20. But to be able to get in on it while the getting's good, trade with your friends, and experience this gem of a game again, I think it is worth the $20, even if it does feel a little steep, and probably could have been included in the Game Boy Advance library that people are already paying for through Switch Online, but what do I know? Let me know in the comments below if you plan on picking up one of these, and if so, which copy are you getting? I think I'll personally be getting Leaf Green, as a friend of mine sounds like he'll be getting Fire Red, and then we can trade to each other. And the prospect of retro Pokemon games coming out on modern hardware with the ability to engage like we used to, I think that's a pretty cool idea. That said, I still hate you, Nintendo, but I do appreciate everybody still watching. Please leave your thoughts in a comment below. I really do appreciate you sticking around to the end of the video, and thanks for stopping by.